For all their squawking about peace, Dragoon ships were the only vehicles in the known galaxy that utilized cloaking technology. At any moment, a Terex vessel could be latched onto and weighing down yours. Hence the nickname for that sleek, angular ship model, the Parasite. 80 arms across, it was like a burrowing worm, a defined head with two geometric fins cropping up out of the slightly wider body to bolster trajectory. With no cloaking, every Dragoon of any edition was green, the color of success as far as the colonies were concerned. The placement of the vehicle was how we had gotten away with it for so long. Me excusing myself to the bathroom on the highest floor, then ducking out of the steel-framed window to slide down the side of the pyramid, until my feet, or ass more likely than not, landed on the transparent side of the ship to grasp around for a handhold, the always unlocked hatch. It was the same deal to Wash, so whatever was so urgent had nothing to do with the spaceship. That only left the constable inside. I looked out into the darkness for a moment, shielding one side of my face from that intense, hot purple light. The star burning just a couple million miles away, casting violet rays over every approaching vessel for as far as the eye could see. Some clunkers, par for the course for undergal frequenters. 3 shiny green ovular pod ships, slender with no wings. High-tech, not usual, but not too out of the ordinary. Stunt ships were common in the docking bay. Flashy traders who wanted to appeal to undergal buyers impressed by shiny things. I closed the now visible hatch over me, milky silver and square, unlike the brown and black rusted round hatch of the Kylix. Opened my visor and took in a big breath of fresh oxygen. Despite the transparent outside, the inside was very visible. It smelled the same as usual, a thick floral scent that followed Aunt everywhere, and stuck to my suit for washes after visits. It was the mess that was the first sign of trouble. Maps unfurled over every surface, sometimes circled, words outlined at random. Printed material was strange enough. It didn't take a star knot ranking to tell this was the telltale sign of someone going off the grid, and way off, according to the muddy footprints on the ceiling. Spare spacesuits draped over the metal rack usually reserved for a single clean towel, giving off that unmistakable and irresistible scent of raw woman, uncloaked by perfume and even more primal for it. Small tin canisters with orange labels dotted the scenery of the cabin like glimpses of some rare bright bird. The ones I had to stride past I made extra care not to read. Some I knew had the updated name on the medication label, but others didn't, and I wouldn't invade her privacy either way. I did, however, chance to grasp the navy-colored baseball cap hanging from a metal hook next to the dashboard, a green snowflake on the center front of it, the underside of the bill shiny and bright emerald. Buried in the midst of it all, reclined with a book in her hands, was Antiope Adams. Her uniform was half hanging off of her body, the unzipped, unbuttoned flaps of gold laying across Aunt's modules so she looked like a melting bar of precious metal. Those big black eyes fixed on me, and she snapped the book shut. You came. As her sense of tidiness about the ship had lacked, so had her dedication to keeping an optimal envoy's appearance. That black hair usually buzzed to within 3 inches of her scalp per United Colony standard, as thick, long, and lush as it ever was. So long now that it curled, something it had never been allowed to do, and that I liked very much. Neat, straight, snipped ends overgrown around her tiny pale ears. Or they seemed so tiny and cute, compared to mine. There were deep black rings around her eyes, which told me she hadn't slept in washes, and a weird sense of dread fell over me then. Aunt was right in front of me. The crew was right outside, but somebody, somewhere, had died. Of course, I sat in one of the 3 swivel chairs surrounding the control panel below the sleep module. I thought it was some kind of emergency. Antiope's crewmates had dispersed for their own solo envoy appointments a yush ago, hence our more frequent meetups. Before the undergal, they'd been stationed on a moon with a small settlement of humans and octals, Herklid. Safe and out of the way of real trouble, just as I was sure their parents had requested to the higher-ups. It is. Aunt zipped the front of her uniform, mending the gold suit so all her patches were visible in neat rows down the front of it. There was her successful Peace Summit badge. She'd earned that standing around along with the thousands of other constables while the Octavian leaders negotiated ownership of Saturn, home to the most vital substance on their planet, ammonia crystals. In the end, a deal was struck. They'd allow Terex to imprison Octals found guilty of crimes against humans if the 5 families agreed to keep a steady flow of outward resources. This summit had been controversial among several orbiting activists, especially infamous turncoat, Constable Olivia Crest. The largest patch was a black square serving as the background for a golden wolf to bound across. Claws reared, rampant, as the red eyes of the beast glared out at the viewer. Under the wolf, maws stretched out to suckle at its teats, 2 gold pups under small wisps of red flame, as if the milk were fire itself. Twins, Ares and Athena. Above the wolf, the words Vincere Sortum Nostrum, the colony motto. This image I'd only encountered a few times, but knew well enough was the Adams family crest. As an extension of that, the image also served as the Terex coat of arms. I stood to cross over to her, gently affixed the baseball cap to her head, traced one patch on her uniform, this one for exemplary discipline. Above it, there were those 4 flower symbols, each beside the other, embroidered in blue amidst the gold suit. One for each of the remaining major families. A flower, they said, for Earth, the planet of abundance we had run to ruin decades before my great-grandma's first kiss. A 5th of the planet designated to Antiope and her siblings at the Secretary's discretion. One hell of an inheritance. My hand wandered from the patches on her chest to her breasts, the other sliding down her waist. Her golden spacesuit was thin, the fabric a silken veil over her flushed skin. This kind? As if she'd expected this, Aunt removed my hand. Guilt shot through me. Sorry, too much? She pulled off my glove and kissed my fingers, each one. Lips brushing the sensitive tips, then tongue tracing the length as she took the longest middle one into her mouth. Is that good? Want roared up in me so powerfully I shivered. Starshine, I breathed. You got no idea. Sure, we hadn't gotten around to any clothes-off action, but it wasn't for lack of desire. Our relative abstinence was due partially to the legal divides between our kinds, and partially to lack of privacy. Sex was something the Grievers almost considered a legend. Privacy is hard to come by as affordable oxygen. There was hardly room or enough alone time for the necessary alone time things humans, Xenos, Calids, Argelics, Octals, and every being alike had an innate need for. Reading in complete quiet, watching embarrassing content on the Vise ejector, never mind sex. I knew well enough, though, that myths were often based on sweet, sweaty reality. Had worked around the mismatched docking schedules and crewmate interruptions with past lovers. But Aunt was a constable. Not just that, the face of the Adams family future. The rules were almost the same as the ones for Xenos. There was no making out with an Adams on the dance floor. There was no way to casually bring one aboard to make your craft quake. With an Adams, there was no courtship, just an affair. Our low profile only lending more credence to the label. After today, if all went well, at last, all the secrecy would go out the airlock. Antiope gave my finger one last exquisite lick, causing the well of warmth in my groin to shudder. Satisfied with the agonized groan that dripped past my sabers, she let my slickened hand swing limply to my side. That's the face I was looking for. Total bliss. Uh-huh, I uttered, trying to force my brain to stop melting. Had to keep it together. What does this have to do with your message? You're going to want to be really relaxed before I show you this. She cleared her throat, reached into her pocket. Aunt produced a silver disc, like a coin, but weirdly seamless. Like a gray eye into another world. A cranny, I knew from stories, but not from experience. Extra-dimensional storage, too rich for my blood. She let the coin-sized eye eat at her arm, and drew back with her fist closed around the handle of a silver suitcase. Aunt heaved it onto her desk. Carefully undid the 2 latches, metal buckles clicking as it burst open. An anti-light poured out. The suitcase was padded over in thick black foam. Nestled in the center, a thick glass bottle throbbed with energy. Inside, a storming fist-sized abyss. Tiny tendrils of lightning lashing out of the swirling miniature black hole. The movements inside as hypnotic as they were chaotic. I moved closer, heart growing cold and still in my chest. No, I had to hold it to be sure. I reached out, that warm black light growing heavy and electric as my fingers neared the bottle. With the new, fresh, wonderful heat, a faint humming growing into a song. Voices far away, beckoning and irresistible. Aunt snapped the suitcase shut, and it shuddered on the desk. She latched it closed. Careful, it's volatile to a warm touch. What? I said, shaking my head and feeling like any accent the next turn might snap me back to reality. Like it's some kind of pet instead of an intergalactic time bomb. It's not a bomb. Aunt climbed up her module, turned the pages of her book to me. Just a tool to a very strange end. A 2-page spread of a diagram of a bottled black hole, labeled with each destructive property known in the universe, all according to available gear and know-how. Compression could create a vortex to eons into the future. Piercing would set off a megasonic sound wave so intense everyone within a 3-galaxy radius would be vaporized instantly. Hell, simply jostling the thing could result in deadly strobing, cooking and dismembering anyone caught touching or just near it. Then, of course, there was uncorking the bottle, which would result in the deaths of the nonillion spacefarers just within the Milky Way as the whole consumed our galaxy, plunging everyone into a scarlet-shaded nightmare known as redshifting before something called spaghettification occurred. Exactly what it sounds like. Dicing us along mathematic grids until we were just bundles of nerve-bound noodles suspended in infinitely slowed space-time. The supermassive black hole having taken on the mass of every object, person, and planetary body before settling into a permanent position occupying our place in the universe. I snatched it from her and snapped it shut. The Beginner's Guide to Treason by Olivia Crest. Illegal on all 13 planets of the UC and in most of inner space. Maroons weren't larcenists, smugglers, nor simple rum runners. There was organization and lethality to how they struck. Someone more than a thief. Someone who would do anything to survive, yet didn't settle for that. A life in open defiance to the colonies, otherwise known as a magnetar for trouble. Sure looks like a weapons manual to me. It's just essays on how to fight back when we've already lost. We? This topic was something we usually avoided, but if I was going to stand one cork away from vaporization, I was going to need some explanations. You don't have to worry about shit, Aunt. If anyone else rode up to the colonies with one of these, they'd be catapulted into the sun. You can just hand it over. No questions asked. No! Aunt shot back, and firmly. I couldn't. I know I've been ignorant in the past, Jay, but I've been, reading. Getting to know more about the things I was shielded from before we met. Starvation, poverty, slavery. No! I shook my head. So this explained the guide. It had happened before me, but it didn't sink in until I looked at the book. The colonies banned radical material for a reason. It had a habit of, radicalizing. In just a yush, Antiope had gone from a well-meaning Terran to a wannabe Maroon. Sure, none of us liked the colonies, hence our operation outside of it, aboard the Kylix, but laying low was our brand. Maroons typically flaunted their affiliation by dyeing their suits deep red, fiery torches for colony crackdowns. As for their cause, the last decades, heavily taxed interspacers had made pushes for independence from the colonies, seeking to effectively eliminate the United Colonies as it existed, leaving only Earth as the true designated home of humans. Everything else to be reclaimed by the original communities run off of the conquered planets, or peacefully shared in agreement with them. Grievous. The independent swath of inner space created, if the secession ever went through, would also free the grievers from their contracts running themselves into debt in order to afford to touch solid ground. The universe's first establishment of spaceborne bastards. Secession, though, of course, would never go through. The colonies allowed a gerrymandered vote on the issue every few years, sure, but this wouldn't matter given one had to be a colony citizen to vote. Not property, not unhuman, human, and with an official colony ID. Whatever the fix, the grievous movement had often been brought up in regards to the Kaleidozin question. Ares had dicked over an entire galaxy, but hadn't managed to get away with it. The least he and the colonies could do was cede land for recovery of their culture to those they'd hurt. If nothing was done, something big would boil over. And soon. Considering the existence of the black hole, things already had. Drawing Dragoon attention was bad enough, the gold suits. But Maroons, anyone with a semblance of a cause that didn't line up with Tarek's values, attracted the silver-suited higher-ups that didn't explain themselves, didn't shoot, didn't knock, only took grievers, disappearing them in the middle of the night. No trials, no rights, just warrants. Not even signed by colony court, but constable court, which answered to no one, not even Ares. Where the silver suits took them, no one knew for sure, but there were whispers around forced farm labor in the correction belt. Not just that, but a silver site. One of a handful of cloaked government locations that torture allegations leaked out of on a quarterly basis. The most well-known of which was accusations of prisoners being forced to fight each other for their freedom. This, legend said, had been the fate of the vanished pop star Libby Kissel, and at the height of her fame. Who was to say an Adams couldn't be next? And what happened to you? Don't talk like this. I've made up my mind, Jean, she said. The same way you did when you defected. A scoff escaped before I could think to hold it in. Don't even go there, Aunt. All I've ever done is steer my crew away from red flags like this. Yeah, well, she hesitated, just barely. Maybe that's why you never addressed them. The fury that surged in me wasn't the loud kind, the kind that drove one to the nearest steel wall to thrash until their fists were bloody, but a silent, incisive one that seemed to nettle Aunt more than any other might. I know this seems like opting in the trouble to someone born into it like you. But I've been listening to Callcast. Oh, Callcast, are you kidding me? That show is just delirious babble, I insisted. The broadcast show was centered around conspiracies and relied on listeners to phone in for juicy anti-colony gossip, monitor cracks in the regime. People that call on the radio shows just want attention. As for that Crest woman, it's the truth, she said. True perspectives. Real callers reaching out for food, water, friendship, help. They help each other because the ones in power see seeking assistance as clamoring for a handout. Now that my eyes are open, the crimes of my father are all I can see. I mean, do you know what the colonies would do with something like this? Gee, I can guess. My eyes fell upon something I hadn't noticed before. So used to seeing it hung up on that hook rather than an ant's hands pointed at me. A long slab of black metal with a wavy grip handle attached to a leather shoulder strap. Ant's hotshot, a colony-exclusive laser weapon. This technology had been stolen from the Kaleidozins, just as the blood of the Adams twins had been siphoned from their veins, all in the name of progress. The reason artificially manufacturing black holes was illegal was because of the expansion skirmishes. Ares had decided long ago that one galaxy wasn't enough for humanity. The 13 planetary colonies was only ever the beginning. The goal was in the United Colonies motto, Vincere Sortum Nostrum. The textbooks translated the phrase as, to conquer our destiny, but the most popular interpretation was, to win our lot. Fight for, and win, control of the universe, and eventually, beyond. What Ares and a rotating assortment of presidents were aiming for was an intergalactic human settlement. Just one, to boost morale, keep the critics sated, and prove, once and for all, we didn't need the Earth, or even the Milky Way, to make a home. This project failed slowly, over the course of dozens of ass beatings at the edge of the Andromeda galaxy next door. Defensive lashings from the Kaleidozins tearing through vast swaths of humans before colony forces retreated. The only way the top colony personnel could think to infiltrate the galaxy was to blow their way through. In 2145, guiding a bottled, homegrown black hole through space to explode on the Kaleidozins' front porch. What the humans hadn't considered, at least as far as Ares was willing to admit, was the permanent destruction of the entire Andromeda galaxy. The black hole swallowing as many kaleidosons as to trigger a near-extinction event, sparing only those still residing, working, or hiding in the Milky Way. Terex bucked responsibility by pointing at their own casualties and their own ignorance as to the extended effects of detonation, but the tragedy had marred Ares' reputation so thoroughly that the bomb itself had been nicknamed the Blunder. Mistake or not, the remaining hundreds of kaleidosons considered it a war-worthy act. To this wash, 30 yushes later, human-helmed ships were still captured in the recesses of space. The crew dispatched, and the steel bones of the ghost craft left floating through space, a bloody husk. Reports included details of dust-caked corpses clinging to the steel innards, gray motes and stray strands of decomposing hair sticking to the raw, exposed muscle of the deceased crews. Because, for some reason, their skin was always missing. The remaining kaleidosons had done their best to recuperate their culture, allying with the Octalavians on Octal 8, though their loss wasn't taken as seriously there, since the Octals had seen 9 major extinction events and crawled back from them all full force due to certain regenerative evolutionary adaptations. Not to mention, despite being allies with the kaleidosons, the Octalavians still needed resource flow from Saturn, so never hesitated to buddy up with Terex despite decades of kaleidosn protests and demonstrations. The Canison Galaxy, I said. Ares had never let go of his dream of an intergalactic human empire. The Octals would fold like fresh laundry at the sight of a new homegrown horror. Where did it come from? Antiope set the buzzing suitcase aside. There was an attack. My old crewmate, Davenon, you know the deal. A dragoon goes into a shadowy corner to investigate strange radio signals. Only their ship emerges. I scrambled for my own radio, made sure the dial was turned to off. You think kaleidosons made it? I know they did. Ant climbed onto her module, craned her neck to gaze out the window above it, out over the station, gleaming in the violet light of the nearest star. There were only 2 of them that I met. It's hard to understand. I told you, I've been listening to Callcast. Lately, like clockwork. Every day at 19 Avens to the 9th Auron, someone calls in just to state a bunch of numbers. I didn't get curious until they said the last coordinates Davenon was known to transmit from. So I followed them to his ship. It was ransacked. Everyone dead. Angelica, though I never did care about her. Then there was Davenon. Ant. I reached out toward her, but she didn't jump into my arms. There was a steely sort of look to her eyes, and a robotic tone to her voice. This wasn't my girlfriend recounting a memory. This was a constable giving an official report. Please don't shut me out. I want to be there for you. Like I was there for Dav? Ant broke composure only to snap this, smoothing her suit before she went on. Angelica was just a cousin of the representative for Lochusk, but Davenon was a griever. A kid, really. Now I understood. The Phoenix Initiative was enacted in 2160 by none other than Ares Adams. It wasn't really called that, but that was the common nickname for the colony integration effort. That and the fuck-up initiative. It was the second thing he was known for after the skirmishes and Operation Eve, and possibly the only progressive act ever carried out by the Adams administration, mandating public transport crafts make frequent stops to farther moons populated by browner people than those working the colonial management positions, granting isolated grievers access to the better-paying places in the galaxy. Davenon had been a griever, more like me in complexion and circumstance than Ant. He knew the risks, my moon, I said. Maybe only a third of grievers finish basic lessons, but you can't write off our common sense. Of that, we are an excess supply. It's not just that. Ant swiped at her eyes. I don't have Terran guilt, Jean. Well, not in a pitying kind of way. Not anymore. He was only a kid. Just 18. Aunt never really talked about her family, but I knew about it in depth the same way everyone knew of my crimes, regardless of my silence on the matter. The press. Cosmorazzi were more dogged than dragoons. Every milestone of Antiope's home life growing up blared across visejectors galaxy-wide. Of course, There was her beaming, charming, golden-voiced father, Ares. But she had siblings as well. An older sister, the pride of Earth as Ares' firstborn, Artemis Adams. Then there was Ant's younger brother, Apollo. She had a protective streak carved into her from years at Apollo's crystal crib side, one that extended especially to young men. I get that, I said slowly. But I was only a pup myself when they drafted me to Starnot Academy. It's not more tragic just because it happens to a human ant. I didn't say it was. 1, she snapped. And 2, you wouldn't know how close I was to Davenon or Apollo because I don't have a family. I headed her off, considering it a favor. She was emotional, grieving, saying things faster than she could think them. If I heard those words from her, the us we'd been building wouldn't be the us that emerged. I know you miss him, Aunt, but I know what it's like to form bonds, to have brothers. Of course, said Aunt. Nelson, right, I'm sorry. Just tell me what you saw. Now I sounded like the constable, the investigator. Antiope swallowed hard and went on. It's more like what I didn't see, she said. My crew members without their skin, every nanobyte of data scrubbed from the computer, every video and audio feed was down or destroyed. There were muddy orange talon prints tracked throughout the craft. I knew the murderer must be on one of the rust moons orbiting Clio. It's an exoplanet. I've heard of it. She was babbling now, though, and ignored me. With 3 moons, you see, Patra, Primus, and Polyphemus. That's the one I found them on. In that garage, like some kind of lab. It was rigged up so that, if Kaleidozin wasn't spoken into a microphone, a countdown would begin. Just 3 accents, but I would have recognized what was in the bottle anywhere. It's the only thing I could save. So the Kaleidozins, they were criminals, Jean. I'm a criminal, Aunt. That word is very relative outside of inner space. So much for keeping our heads down. To think the same soft fingers that squeezed the trigger of a hotshot had sent shivers all through me. My girlfriend, the possible breathing match hovering over the largest spaceborne battle yet to come. Sure, everyone knew the Kaleidozins were behind the disappearances, but Kaleidozin leaders vehemently denied it. Despite their great population losses, their extragalactic weaponry and abilities were beyond anything humans could replicate. A gunpoint treaty had been drawn up shortly after the skirmishes, promising independence to the remaining Kaleidozins, and freedom specifically from violent human action. Killing Kaleidozins was an intergalactic crime, punishable by execution. You're the most wanted human in the entire Milky Way. Yeah, sure, to Kaleidozins, Aunt added. Most of them are in the canison anyhow. I didn't have a choice. Would you have rather their plan went through? I'm not ready to be a noodle, Jean. Okay, I said. You're right, but if the colonies found out about the near miss, retaliation would be swift and deadly on both ends, potentially exterminating either humans or Kaleidozins, or both. The Octalavians would be caught in the middle, forced to pick sides, punished either way. Segregation would ramp up, a total crackdown on the Xenome codes. Hundreds of armed dragoons with seasoned Starnots, set loose in Kaleidozin settlements. Not one sacking, but dozens, the most brutal yet. This is bad. Jean? The metal plating of the floor and walls whirled across my vision in a blur of silver. The wall finding my back with a solid, dull thud that might as well have been that boulder. Black and orange, like the remnants of some mottled meteor blending into the landscape. That boulder, that invasion, that endless pleading. Jean, what's wrong? I'd only experienced one sacking myself. Unlike constables, galactic diplomats, all Xenogenes were born off Earth, a planet at the edge of the colonies. The 11th settlement, a ghost town that had never really taken off. Wolfthrop, home only to the gestation facilities nursing litter upon litter of Xenogenes. We were kept away from the general population for 20 yushes, barely raised on Wolfthrop really, but thrown loose oats and lava leech entrails every other wash. Kept in enclosures since we were infants, and already super strong. In vitro technology so developed at the point of the first Xeno production in 2125 that the scientists on Wolfthrob could intricately weave a genetic tapestry of modern human and ancient hominid, digitally patching in the gaps with DNA from creatures on Earth with the most advanced senses. Each of us the orphan from some mismatched soup of athlete, animal, and Neanderthal. The way this presented was different for everyone, as the genes were. Some of my peers with the incredible lung capacity of a professional swimmer, the sprinting skills of the fastest known human paired with leopard claws to throw the distance behind you, or the rectangular pupils of a grazing animal, able to see 300 degrees more than any human. For me, it was thick, curled, black ram's horns, sabered fangs from some hulking, carnivorous feline that lived millennia ago. There was the strength, too. Thus, the whiskers and the tail, either inherited from the ancient human genes or the feline. The ears were from neither, long, ever perked, and roughly the size of small satellites. There were a few major flaws in my design, though. I was nearsighted, smaller than my peers, and prone to depression, earning me the nickname the Weeping Runt, back when nicknames were the only way we could distinguish each other. I hadn't grasped what my real name was till I was 15, and we were finally enrolled into the Starnaut Academy, on Wolfthrop's moon, Serpentarius. Well, all of us save for Subject Z, who was shipped off for observation as all Zs eventually were, for study, to help scientists improve on our design. Or so we were told. Our instructors were handpicked by Dr. Julia Hare to stoke what was genetically modified to come naturally to us, aggression. Only one bothered to address me as anything other than you, XGJ 2151. What I lacked in vision, size, and mental stability, I made up for with my reflexes, which it turned out was more important than clear sight or brawn anyway. My instructors honing and praising my risk-taking in the pilot simulator. Depression had its use behind the steering wheel. If I didn't care about my own safety, I could serve the colonies without even my own mortality holding me back. A faithful scout of the United Colonies. What else I was created for, I didn't know until our training came to a head under a special order passed down to Dr. Hare from Antiope Adams himself. Appearing in holographic form to describe the trial under fire, our first true field trip off of Wolfthorpe. My first time behind a real steering wheel, not one mounted under a simulation screen. We were to wipe out the rebellious population of Ksev, a bountiful planet inhabited by burrowing aliens with worm-like skin, smooth and banded in oozing slime. They were humanoid in all other ways, though, something my compeers took advantage of when we landed. Instructions were clear. They'd had their chance to surrender to colony supervision. Now every last oozer was at the mercy of my class. In order to advance to Starnaut and be assigned to a constable to lead us aboard one of those cloakable dragoon ships, we had to prove ourselves on Ksev. Stomp out the enemy, yes, but more importantly, as Ares had noted, make them wish they'd never resisted in the first place. Ksev started out with a population of 25,000. Each corpse counted to assure their elimination, stacked on top of each other, torched, mutilated, gored through, horn holes riddling the bleeding, slack masses. Some half-eaten, others smeared in excrement. The worst part by far were the stragglers. Oozers that had been forced out of the deepest burrows, dragged out of their hiding spots and beaten to near death, but only near. To keep them warm, I was told by more than one of my classmates. Where that factored in, one can use their imagination. I don't have to, though. That's when I decided I wouldn't be sticking around for graduation. Wolfthorpe was a wasteland of jalopy ships, one half of the planet lit, where we were born, but the other forever submerged in shadow. That's where the demolitions took place. Metal sorting carried out by low-level colony employees, unarmed ones who wouldn't be eager to report that a craft slated for cube-shaped compaction had slipped through the cracks. Ares, however, noticed immediately when I didn't report for assignment, personally bestowing medallions upon each victor's shoulder at a ceremony known as the Hephaestus Ball. It was said he still wore my medal. Even 5 yushes later, it was a risk to dock for more than an auron. In time, inevitably, some passing envoy would be tipped off about a craft lacking a landing license, which I'd happily apply for if the whole system wasn't set up to be as cyclical and frustrating as possible to punish orbiters. A craft couldn't be registered for a landing license without proof of its pilot's initial credentials. One couldn't pursue pilot's credentials without participating in the expansion order. One couldn't participate in the expansion order without seeing things that made me, want to abandon my post in the first place. There was no peace for fugitives. Sure, on the surface, my crime was astrovehicular theft, but they didn't pursue just any thief so thoroughly. Wasting valuable colony time and resources, that was my real charge. Stealing away with need-to-know knowledge in my head and a patent attached to every helix of my genes. The total debt coming around to the financial tune of 96 trillion colony dollars. An impossible number, but it translated to just 500,000 drokens. I'd never seen more than 3,000 in one place at a time. Never had more than 500 on hand. Yet, maybe Ant was right. The bottle in the suitcase, the black hole in the bottle, wasn't a bomb, but a breakthrough. Not a weapon, but our winnings. Unliquidated riches. Untapped potential. I've got an idea, but you need to stay open-minded. Ant eyed me a moment, climbing down from her module to take each in my hands. What is it? You don't have plans for it, do you? I asked. Other than keeping it away from Ares, I mean. Antiope blushed, turning her gaze away as she unclasped my hands. I do, she said, but you're not gonna like it. I would have given anything to be curious. Try me, I said, knowing full well what Ant had in mind. Well, Ant shrugged, hugging herself and drumming her fingers along her upper arm. You're thinking of the black hole as a weapon, when you should think of it as the most influential tool in the galaxy. That's better than destruction, Gene. More than it. Just like, the red suits are more than spoiled landfolk, she said, the defense at the ready, anticipating my every move. I know that's what you think of them, but there's nothing wrong with fighting when it's for the innocent. No, I agreed, but there is something wrong with putting your life on the line for something, a cause, Ant cut in. A cause you know nothing about, I said. It's as simple as that, Ant. It isn't. For me it is. At once I was aware of the captain finality creeping into my tone. I hated it, but needed it now more than ever. Needed Ant to understand. Before we met, I'd lead the crew into desperate failed heist after desperate failed heist. For ions, for an engine, for water, for food. The Dragoons always caught on. We always just got away. We run for a reason, Antiope. Once you get the attention of Terex, there's no peace. Then there shouldn't be any peace. Ant choked on the words, swiping at her damp, flushed cheeks. I see what you mean, Gene, but the things I've already done to get this, we can't just destroy it. I don't want to destroy it, I said. I want to sell it. Not to a human, not to a Kaleidozan, someone neutral with faraway reasons for wanting it. Some distant galaxy, some distant war. Gene! Her tone then was hard to parse. Judgmental? Scandalized? I know it gets used either way, but we might not have another chance. Slow down. Ant was taller than me, my curved horns coming up to her shoulder. She pulled those blue gloves off to pet my horns now, just lightly tracing the sharpened ends in that way that made the fur on my tail stand on end. Another chance for what? I explained as much by leaning up on my toes. She met me halfway, pressing her cool, full lips to mine. Softly at first, her tongue grazing my sabers, each one hand-length and on either side of my mouth, so sharp no matter what I did that Ant nicked her tongue on one. I didn't know until she deepened the kiss, and I tasted her blood. I closed my eyes to build a full flavor profile. Iron, robust and pungent. She was healthy. Of course she was. Always well fed. Her father would see to that. While the rest of us in orbit starved. I couldn't help but consider how soft and smooth her hands were on me, inside my suit versus my own, calloused from gripping the steering wheel. Ant tried to run her hands through my hair, but the wild mop of twists was in no way colony standard. We had to part to get her fingers untangled. That's when I asked her, as she drew her hand back and I tucked away a long, stray twist. I want you to move in with me, Ant. Aboard the Kylix, I mean. She rolled her eyes. Of course, short term, she said, tucking the silver suitcase containing the blunder inside the gray cranny in her hand. Aunt donned a backpack as well, stray spacesuit sleeves hanging out of it, pressed against the sides as the middle bursts with full sacks of crystallized ions. Premium fuel. My ship cloaks, but there's a location bug somewhere in the walls. Anyone could home in with the right tech, and you said yourself I'm an intergalactic fugitive. It's only a matter of time until they close in. Not short term, I said, sweat sliding down my palms. Long term. It's an eyesore, sure, but a freighter ship before Cat fixed it up. There's a lot more space than you think. It fits the four of us just fine, all with separate sleep modules. Those are private, at least, if that's what you were worried about. Or if you think it's too weird to commit like this to someone you've never been with. In that way, I mean. Aunt's tone was teasing, giddy, and laced with allure when she said, "It is sort of old-fashioned. I'm a 22nd century woman, Jean." Then let's modernize. We kissed again, but with a feral fervor I hadn't allowed myself to feel with Aunt yet, or at least hadn't allowed her to see. Me bearing down on her as she backed to the sterling steel-plated walls, our hands all over each other, tearing at the zippers on the front of our suits. I needed that feeling, skin on skin, and Aunt delivered, taking me by the shoulders to urge me into her chest, an area I hadn't been permitted to explore until now. Antiope had never mentioned what a hindrance my mammoth sabers were directly, but just kissing on the mouth posed enough of a challenge, was new enough territory. All those sensitive organs, the ones that were shiver-skinned and swollen and so pleasurable to the touch it seemed a shame they ever go back behind clothes, seemed too risky to chance near my teeth. "Are you sure?" "It's okay, Jean," Aunt panted. "I trust you." My mouth found her sweet, hard nipple amid her soft, warm breasts. First one, watching my sabers, the tips, the glistening white edges. Then the other. Antiope groaned, took a hold of my spacesuit, and practically lifted me up inches off the floor for a kiss that made the Big Bang look like a minor traffic collision. The knot between my legs throbbed, aching to be unraveled. Our suits were at last peeled off, but only to the waist. It was no exaggeration to say that below that was forbidden territory, entire laws dedicated to upholding appropriate behavior between person and property. In an envoy, constables only carried out a job. Xenos were our job. Piloting and mauling sewn into our DNA, pleated in thousands of layers over the human core. Xenos could get with other Xenos, no problem, though it was considered taboo for xenogenes from the same production yush to fool around. The genetic pool from which we were spawned rotating on an annual basis, so we were whelped alongside just over 24 of our relatives. As for the genetic generations preceding and following my class, even I had been with another of my kind. An octal once or twice, all of us unhuman in that umbrella sense. Now, though, I had never been more aware that Antiope was human. Not just human, Terran. And not just Terran, the secretary's daughter. Just then, a pang of that thing that had shaded over me on the dance floor shot through me, as if those Terrans and their glaring eyes were with us inside the ship. Shame. Through the eyes of our invisible spectators, I watched myself, greedy, straining for more of Antiope's tongue. Pawsy, my hands curled like claws, one closed over her waist to pull her closer to me, the other around her breasts. Everything about me too fast, too deep, too much. Sorry, I pulled back. I didn't mean to. I got carried away. You don't have to apologize, Jean. I like it when you kiss me like that. As we parted, the stiffened outline straining at the groin of her suit became apparent. Usually, panting and coming down from making out, I'd follow Aunt's lead and ignore the sight. Tonight, though, she cast a long glance down. Unless it makes you uncomfortable. The emphasis on the word wasn't lost on me. You could never make me uncomfortable, I said. I want you, Aunt. All of you. As for the, gender stuff, everything I feel like I should have, I don't, and that I shouldn't have, I do. It's always been so confusing to me, trying to make what I am fit into what they say I should be. Jean, Aunt squeezed my shoulder. This wasn't a topic we visited often, But if we were moving in together, I figured we'd find ourselves delving more into the unspoken stuff sooner rather than later. What I'm trying to say is, your pleasure is important to me. I went on, my voice growing thick with emotion. If you want, you can trust me with your body. And I trust you. It's just that orange dust drifted across my vision, dirt glazing my eyes. 3 Xenogenes holding a screaming, scrabbling oozer. His cries howling until the dirt was so dampened with his blood that his struggles no longer kicked up dust. Breathe. Aunt's voice pierced through the vision of the past. Jean, you're not breathing. She clapped me on the back until, like an old engine, my lungs leapt to function. I croaked, It's not you that spoiled it. It was me. A tremble gripped my fingers. I curled my hands to fists. I'm being too pushy. Acting like an animal. The word tore out of me in a nasty, barking bleat. Aw, Jean. Aunt stroked my cheek, cleared the tears there. I know you don't like to talk about this stuff, but I'm not your victim. I'm your lover. You're not pressuring me. I'm choosing you. She blushed a pulsing scarlet, opening her palm to take my swishing tail into her grasp. Everything about you. Antiope brought the black tip of my tail to her lips and kissed it, kissed my horns, gently pressed her lips to my sabers. You're not hurting me. I'd let you know if you were. Thank you, I said. Thanks for understanding. Aunt was right. I didn't want to talk about this. Not this, not Wolfthrop, not what I was really made for. There's no time for this anyway. We could make time. Aunt made a compelling case, fingers playing along the seam over my groin. I thought you majored in urban planning. Drool inched down my chin, and I swiped at it with the back of my hand. Not physics. Aw. Aunt kissed my left saber. You remembered my major. She ran her tongue along the length of it while she rubbed me. Applied just enough pressure for me to forget about the blunder. For a moment, forget about what the big rush was at all. I want to get closer to you, Captain. Tonight, I said, the word electric with promise. The crew's waiting. With that, for now, we parted. Antiope mended her suit with a definite zip, thrusting her arms through the sleeves. Before I could grip my own zipper, she pinched it between her fingers, eased it gingerly up to my chin. Speaking of the crew, I'm sure the Kylix fits the 4 of you just fine, but that's just it. The 4 of you. You all might be friends, but they loathe me. They'd never let me on board. They're the ones who encouraged me to ask. Aunt, we can't keep hanging around the undergal. Ares will catch on eventually, but we can't be apart either. I said it as fact. We'd be worried about each other all the time. Who says I worry about you? Come on, Antiope. We both know you're in love with me. There was too much risk and proof on either side for us to argue the matter further. It's time we move on, together. Buy our freedom from your father, negotiate a landing license, settle down on some moon. It doesn't matter which one, as long as we're safe, and we're together. Jean, maybe he could come to the wedding, even. I went on, feeling wild and reckless even as I spoke. That's what humans do when they love each other, right? When it's supposed to be forever. Get hitched? Then he'll have to accept me. It'll be official, on his terms. Yeah. Aunt wandered away from me in that constable inspector way. Hands clasped at the small of the back as she marched across to her desk, rolled up a constellation map. That is what they do when they can get marriage permits. Do you know who issues those for space grievers? Terraturns, Jean. Terraturns answer to judges. Judges answer to Terraclerics. And Terraclerics answer to my father. She traced a palm over a recreation of the stars above Venus. You're very romantic, but not very practical. That's why we need someone like you aboard, I said. You know how the colonies work. We don't. We're aimless. We're capable, yes. I'm an excellent pilot. Poole picks up languages as easily as moon rocks. Ush is the finest medic to ever operate on a negative budget, and Cad could fix anything with duct tape and a sensible hammer. But we've only hidden in the colonies. You've surveyed them. Hardly, Aunt protested. I've only drawn up a few rudimentary maps of Herclid, Marcine, and Upper East Proxtari. And I've drawn up 0, I shot back. I go by what people like you enter into the galactic positioning system. My crew needs more than someone who can fly the ship. We need someone who knows where the fuck we're going. You know Terex as well as I know you. This neither of us argued with. You're what we're missing, Ant. A tracker who knows how our enemies operate. I keep us going, but you could keep us safe. Antiope blushed. I'm no master tracker, Gene. No, I said. After all those yushes dodging your dad, it was you who found me. Ant smirked. I didn't find you, Gene, she said. I just saw you standing there with your hand out. That's what I said. I stretched out my hand now. You found me. Ant clasped my palm, and without having to talk about it, we recreated the scene, lying on our backs to stare up at the ceiling. Of course, that night, we'd had the entire galaxy laid out in front of us, blinking and breathless and black. Ares had been circulating my XGID for 3 yushes at that point, along with a photo of 20-yush-old me. Taken Octavers before the Oozer invasion, before my hair had grown past 3 inches, and before my horns had developed their deep curves. By 2173, though, my hair was a mop of black twists, and my horns were thick, full, curved, and sensitive. I'd outgrown his image of me. There was still, however, the matter of my peers. Maybe my more matured horns would ward off the Dragoons, but they also warded off everyone else. That night on Proxtari, though, on an island in the middle of a purple ocean of low, swirling fog called Pacific City, was the Volturnalia Festival, the Yushli parade of the Great Griever. Every 300 washes or so, everyone who recognized the loss of the billions of grievers in the first Yush following the eviction exodus would don a black cloak and a solid mirror mask, with openings only for the eyes and mouth within the glass mold. Those attending festivals in open space like us would add a pair of black tin horns to the ensemble. Such was the case with the throngs of celebrators flooding the streets that night. Something to do with horns representing evil earthen animals and embracing our birthright of bad luck. The masquerade, a tradition tracing back to the original survivors of the Exodus. The dwindled crew had only managed to convey so much about their earth-born culture to the first generation of grievers before the vacuum claimed them too. What was left was fashioned into Volturnalia. At first, I attended out of convenience. The one time a Yush I could show my face on land for more than an hour, of course I took advantage. But hedonism was only half of the celebration. The other half was the die-in. Cat abstained from all Hollywash celebrations per his Kaplarashtian beliefs. So he and Poole had hung back in the Kylix awaiting my call for pickup, while Ush peddled the latest green onion variety pack of Kylix Kulch to a snobbish bunch I didn't care to get to know. Humans could only stomach so much onion juice in their beer, so we were more novelty than staple. Only Kaleidozin seemed to stock up on our stuff. Yet, because tensions were flaring more than ever, we rarely ran into them. This left us with only the tourists, of which, thankfully, there was just the clamoring gaggle. The parade was sprawling, stereos blaring discordant music at random, placed wherever, because plugs were wherever. Windows open, people leaned outside to pass down masks and sloshing cups of cool water. Masked people twisted up into leather pretzels as orgies spilled out of alleyways and into the open street, where paraders simply stepped over them. The bars were the only places anyone took off their mask, otherwise the liquor would run down the glassy surface of it, dribbling over your shirt. Though some gleefully did this, toasting the Great Griever as the drink made contact with the dirt. At 12 aurons on the dot, the beginning of the next wash, though still completely in the dead of the evening, everyone collapsed, as if cut down by some invisible gunfire. Not at once, but a wave as people staggered backwards to find a comfortable landing spot. We would, after all, be lying there for the next auron. I'd been caught on the outskirts of a local park, the equipment barren, and the metal base of the swings and slide obscured by the sea of breathing bodies. The grass was deep blue on Proxtari, despite the best efforts of the Terex Agricultural Commission. Blue, tall, and pillowy when I stretched out on it, my limbs out and my back to the ground. Per tradition, I reached out to the person who settled down next to me, a woman in a pale pink spacesuit, Not a typical color, lavender was for spacebound grievers, black for the land written of us. Pink, however, was usually a mourner's color, the hue drawn from a delicate dyeing process, one-time wear at most, then back in the closet. I was a sitting target, I said. You could have called for backup. You could have taken your shot. Who says I didn't take my shot? Grinned Antiope. Years ago, she'd taken my hand, lied with me for an hour, watched the same sky as me, wispy clouds wandering over the stars to give the entire night the illusion of being watched by millions of blinking eyes. We'd asked each other one question. Mine was simple. She wasn't in her constable get-up yet, but I knew well enough that Aunt was no seasoned spacefarer. Her gray boots were unscuffed, the stitching neat and tight still along the base. Barely walked in. Her skin had a glowy kind of quality, giving off the kind of shine one only emitted if they'd been in direct sunlight within the past months. Even more, she proudly sported a baseball cap. Dust disc was considered the sport of champions for grievers, a homegrown, fast-paced, risk-based sport that involved ricocheting metal discs off of asteroids in the Oort belt. Baseball was considered the dinosaur of recreation, a holdover from Earth's more boring summers. It was unspeakable to root for a team in public. This didn't quell the emergence of a nostalgic group known as the Ichabod Icicles, the only space-based baseball team in existence, with a rotating roster of players all vying for Earth's Hall of Fame to no avail. Every season hosted on the pale green moon Ichabod, rotating a barely larger planet called Erie in the Neo-Levy quadrant. A green snowflake, the Icicles logo, was situated in the center of Antiope's cap. 2 years ago, I pointed to it. There was a game tonight, right? She'd replied, yeah, but the score is the same as always. 0-1. I understood the typical ratio. At least it's always a close call. Maybe at first it was just Terran guilt driving her to the charity, asking to see our ship just to offer to cover the cost of the most dire repair needed. But Aunt stuck around. And apparently, though in a lot of ways she'd been doing it from the start, changed. Even if the maroon talk was a bit off-putting, it was nice to finally see that passion in the right place, her ire aimed at the right people, her own. Antiope, I grasped the bill of her cap, picked the hat up and set it down on her head backwards. Everything in space is so in the air and untraditional. I don't know anything about my own culture. I want to honor your roots and do things the typical way for once. That's really sweet, Jay, said Aunt, rising to her feet. But I mean, sure, I was born on Earth, but I don't even bleed like an Earthling. Terran culture isn't necessarily mine. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to generalize. It's just that I don't know. I suppose I've been thinking a lot about milestones, I guess. I bit my tongue physically to keep myself from babbling. I just mean that it seems like only yesterday I was crawling through a broken window and feeling around in the glove compartment for a key. And now it's 5 years later, and 3 people depend on me to keep that hunk of junk chugging. In another 5, I'll be 30, Aunt. At this, she sighed with a labored groan. Oof, yeah, that rings a bell. She looked down at her hands, which I only noticed now were blotchy bright red, her palms raw. There are definitely some things I didn't think I'd be taking into another decade. Well, there are things I've been thinking, wanting to. I racked my memory for the lines, the ones I'd typed and deleted and altered over the course of scepters. Aunt, you make me feel like I'm discovering something new and thrilling and on the cusp of impossibility. Everything about you has this intense gravitational pull. What it is exactly, I don't know, but it must mean something. I want it to mean something. Ah, Jean. Antiope drew a hand across her watery eyes. Are you making this up as you go, or did you practice that line? About half and half, I admitted, standing and extending my outstretched hands. I mean what I say, but I might be quoting my notes just a bit. My vows. Antiope matched me, stepping closer to take my hands. As far as proposals went, there weren't many Terran traditions I was aware of, other than asking on one knee. Now, though, it felt right to see Aunt from the usual angle. Both of us on our own feet. Aunt, if you marry me, I'll never have to see the sun again. You'll be my home star. You already are. I paused just for a moment. Had to be sure of this. Griever's superstition claimed saying this in falsehood would doom a captain's ship. I orbit you. Antiope laced our fingers, her black eyes searching the metal-plated floor for a moment before meeting mine. What about the permit? My father would never issue it. We'll bribe a Terratern to let us slip through the system when we apply, I said. Terraturns don't do that. No, I said, you don't. Corruption can work in our favor sometimes, too. A few beats, my heart thrumming in my ears. The sound so constant, like an angry hive of Fazo wasps. So, what do you think? Antiope thought for a moment. Yes, she said, slow-like, but under one condition, and it's non-negotiable. Of course, I said, dizzy, my head spinning. I leaned against the wall to avoid swaying. Anything, Aunt. She grinned across from me. I'm taking your last name. Antiope lost her footing as the entire undergal rocked. The hazard lights flooded the Dragoon in blinking red light. The security system blaring down from the speakers lining the ceiling. High velocity impact detected. In case of danger, please launch escape pod. High velocity impact detected. In case of danger, please launch escape pod. I righted my glasses, pushing them up from where they'd slid down my nose. What the... The intercom erupted into a cacophony of jumbled language. High velocity. Danger. Please launch. Danger. Impact detected. In case of... Pod. Antiope pulled herself to her feet at the control panel, entered a series of passwords before the security system shut off and the hazard lights blinked back to gold. Shit! Are you hurt? I picked her up, thinking one of her ankles must be tender, but she shook her head in my arms. It's not me, it's... them. 3 high-velocity objects, 3 ships impacted with the undergal. Kaleidosons, I breathed. They know. Kaleidosons had a kind of hive mind, a neurogalactic link. For Kaleidosons, the hive was a religion, an organ, and food source all in one. Aunt, when you killed those blunderbrewers, how many eyes did they have? What do you mean? Aunt slung a pack over her shoulder, holstered her hotshot, snub-nosed black and gleaming where she had it leaned against the wall. 8, of course. Shit. What color were they? I don't know, bright? What color? Orange? Were they orange? She said, they were more like gold. Fuck. The shift was subtle, 2 extra eyes blooming on their face, those orange irises burning over to a hot fiery gold, the mark of the link. First to that Kaleidoson's pod, then their pod, then their own, on and on until every Kaleidoson in the universe watched as Antiope slaughtered their endangered ilk. Another trigger-happy constable, this time gone too far. We've got to get out of here.